If you're just joining us this evening, we are on top of some major breaking news as we've learned of the death of Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who died today at the age of 87 after a battle with pancreatic cancer. In fact, her fifth bout with cancer dating back to 1999. As we know, she dealt with a lot of health issues in recent years, but she continued her work even at times from the hospital when she heard some court cases from there. Ginsburg served on the Supreme Court for 27 years. She was nominated by President Clinton and was only the second female justice in American history after Sandra Day O'Connor. She's going to be remembered as a pioneer for women's rights and for gender equality for not only her work on the court, but also her work before she got to the Supreme Court. The court did make that announcement shortly ago, saying that she died at her home in Washington, surrounded by family, and interestingly, that in the last few days made a statement to her family in which she said her most fervent wish is that she will not be replaced until a new president is installed. Again, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, a 27-year member of the High Court, has died at 87. Local attorney and Fox 5 legal analyst Wendy Patrick joins us now for some reaction to this. And Wendy, you knew Ruth Bader Ginsburg, at least in passing with events that you were involved with. Tell us your reactions to the news tonight.
Oh, it's a huge loss. You know, so many of us in the legal community knew her, and not only knew her, but also knew her to the extent that a little bit of the personal side of Ruth. And one of the things that characterized her all throughout her career was her accessibility. And that's one of the reasons so many of us had the chance to have personal conversations with her. I was sworn in front of the U.S. Supreme Court, like many of us have been, usually through our law schools. I was also a member of the American Law Institute, and she was always at our events, whether it was speaking or attending or receiving an award. Her courageousness, I mean, if that's what 87 looks like, we're not afraid to get older, because she did it all up until the very end. So it's a huge loss. I think that's pretty much has bipartisan support, regardless of what your politics or your ideology is. You can agree that she was a very inspirational, wonderful woman.
As she's going to be remembered, what did she mean for women, not only in the legal profession, but certainly beyond that as well?
Beyond that as well was she also had an enormous impact, because she represented really a generation of change. She was not afraid to stand up for everything she believed in, and she spoke for so many women on so many different subjects. One of the biggest was there should never be a glass ceiling and you should be able to achieve anything you can. But it also was that stretching across the aisle, her friendship with Justice Antonin Scalia, for one thing. She was friendly with everyone. She never let her politics color her personal life. That is one of the reasons she was so beloved. And so people were so curious about her over the years, because she seemed to be able to do it all. And it is in that vein that she'll be remembered, both personally and professionally.
Not only for her work, Wendy, but I'm curious how her legacy has been affected and maybe enhanced by what we've seen in recent years. As like you said, she's continued to fight even at the age of 87. She battled through cancer. She had a couple movies made about her and her to rise to where she got in her career. How has her legacy been enhanced by all of that in recent years?
Her resilience in the face of so many obstacles, as you point out, whether it was health-wise or policies or politically or in the legal field, she was a series of firsts, and she battled it right till the end. She never faced something that she viewed as insurmountable. In fact, remember what she's even said over the last couple of years when she's had some health issues. She's going to stay as long as she felt that she could be effective on the court, and that's exactly what she did.
Yeah, again,
so she's going to be remembered for so many positive things, and remains an inspiration and an encouragement to both women and men everywhere.
Yeah, still effective even from the hospital bed at times as she got cancer treatment in recent months and years, which is really remarkable. Now, Wendy, you talked about how she reached across the aisle. She was very, very close with Antonin Scalia. How do you think that will affect what we see in the days to come as she's remembered, as she's honored in Washington from across the aisle, from across the ideology of what Washington is?
I think that it's going to have an enormous impact on everybody that knew her. And, you know, our hearts and prayers are with her family, because she had such fans on both sides of the aisle politically and in terms of ideology. There's nobody that is going to remember her any other way. And that's one of the things that differentiates really the legacy she leaves from, you know, many other divisive figures. She was not that. She was really a uniter. She really tried to reach across the aisle and was always accessible and friendly, regardless of who you were. And I think that she's going to be remembered for that as well. It's a huge loss, I bet that if she has a funeral, we're going to have to rent out a stadium somewhere because everybody is going to want to really be there to pay their respects and talk about what she meant to them because so many people knew her.
What do you make of that last wish that we heard about from the last couple of days, Wendy, where she says she doesn't want to be replaced until the next president is in place, whether it's Joe Biden or President Trump in a second term? And really, I guess, coincidental to a certain extent that her close friend Antonin Scalia also died under similar circumstances. He died in February of 2016, an election year. She died today in September of an election year. What do you make of that request that she made?
It speaks to the passion she held for what she believes about the integrity of the court. I would say the same thing, ironically, if Antonin Scalia had passed and you'd asked me the same question. You know, that is one of the things that characterizes a great jurist is they want to make sure that the integrity of the court is maintained. We talked about that after Scalia's passing, and we'll talk about it after Justice Ginsburg's passing. And every time we lose a great member of the court, that they are interested in the integrity of the organization, the integrity of the bench, and the fact that it's the highest court in the land. And it is a responsibility that she took so seriously that despite the health challenges that she faced, she challenged and she battled successfully to some extent over the last few years. She maintained her dignity all the way till the end, and that's characterized by the statement you just asked me about, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Let me ask you about the election effects, and help us understand, Wendy, if you can, when people look at the election now coming up here in just a month and a half, and some people might make a decision on who they want their next president to be based on this vacancy in the Supreme Court, assuming it's not filled before then. Why does it matter which president's in place when it comes to filling a spot like this, and how can it go either way, I guess, on either side?
Well, the president who's in place obviously has the opportunity to select the type of nominee that will go forward to potentially fill that seat. So, of course, if it is Joe Biden, we can imagine he'll have his own list of candidates. We already know who President Trump has on his list because he's made his list public. So they would be more conservative. They would be the ones that the Republicans would like to see in office. And I have to say that it's a very important issue for voters. I know plenty of single issue voters that really do consider to a large extent who the next president is going to use to fill that seat, or at least who they're going to push forward, then of course who's going to be able to be confirmed. And that's important because of their personal beliefs, their ideology, whether it's national security or right to life or all the different social issues that go into the kinds of cases the Supreme Court hears. That's going to be very important as well. So the fact that this tragedy occurred so close to an election will, I believe, have an impact on the way people vote, because this, again, is one of the issues that people use in deciding how they want to cast that vote.
To that same effect, Wendy, how does it change the laws of this country, or the perspective on laws in this country when you have a Supreme Court justice who might be from the other side of the aisle than the person that they're replacing? How might a decision here in November ultimately affect how this country looks in the years to come?
It'll affect how this country looks by affecting the way the court rules on so many important issues before it. Not only issues that are already before the court, but issues that will reach the Supreme Court that are just now being debated in the lower courts. So we talk a lot about the composition of the court in terms of being, is it conservative, is it liberal, who are the swing justices? Now, when it comes to filling that seat, there'll either be an opportunity to bring the court even further to the right, make it more conservative, or to even the playing field, so to speak. That would be the arguments, respectively, that both sides would bring to the table in determining how to go forward from here. But I also do have to say, I've been a lawyer for over 25 years. Please, nobody do the math. There are many cases in which there is agreement and which the Supreme Court is unanimous. We never talk about that, because it is far more interesting to talk about the cases where we know there's going to be a split and then we opine who's going to be on which side, although we know who's conservative and who's liberal. Yeah. But there are plenty of times that court comes together. And I believe that's what we're going to see in the next couple of days when it comes to remembering Ruth Bader Ginsburg. You're going to see that court be completely united because she was so beloved, not just by the public, sometimes even by her detractors, but definitely by her fellow jurists and her colleagues on the court.
Certainly fair points there, and well said, Wendy, when it comes to, yeah, we always cover those stories, I guess, and those cases where there's a lot of division, but it's not always the case. Whoever it is who replaces Ruth Bader Ginsburg certainly will figuratively have some big shoes to fill. We appreciate the insights.
She was about 100 pounds,
Yes.
but she really was just full of fire. Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, you bet. Wendy, thank you very much for the insight.